This is understandable politics. Hello, the backbone of the European Union has become spineless. In the Bundestag, it's increasingly said that Germany has long been a vassal of the USA. Chancellor Scholz is taking the heat. Germans call him nothing but the White House's servant. How did Berlin end up like this, and why is the title of the 51st state slipping away from the once proud German burghers? What are American bases doing in Germany? How many are there, and where is business heading? With German pedantry, Germany has been cornering itself for decades. The USA has long been planning to weaken its competitor. A whole international structure was specially built for political dependence after World War II. Germany lost the war and was divided between the USSR and Western allies into zones of influence. While Moscow was rebuilding the GDR, Washington decided to help too, but for money. Thus, the famous Marshall Plan was born.
The plan involved allocating $13 billion to restore the European economy. This massive loan was divided among Western European countries and Turkey. Historians believe this program marked the beginning of the world's division into East and West. The White House emerged unscathed from both world wars. The U.S.'s share in the economy and politics of European countries began to grow rapidly.
By 1948, war-torn Germany experienced a real miracle. Factories opened, the Deutsche Mark strengthened, and large-scale construction began. Great, right? But we all know where free cheese is found. That's how Washington, amid general enthusiasm, began to hook Deutschland not only on its loans, but also its influence.
The loans were largely tied. That is, Germany could only purchase from Americans. Thus, the American eagle's claw turned the German bear's head in the desired direction of development. In exchange for American investments, Germany had to cleanse its government of communists and leftists, and fully follow the U.S. course.
At the same time, under U.S. influence, Germany's political system began to form, which still operates today. The oldest parties of the FRG, the Christian Democratic Union and the Social Democratic Party of Germany, have always guarded the interests of pro-American economic and financial elites in Germany. These parties act as safeguards, preventing independent parties like Alternative for Germany from interrupting the pro-American narratives of the FRG establishment.
For this, Germany paid much more than it received from the Marshall Plan. So much more money went from Germany to the USA than returned to Germany through the Marshall Plan. And the Marshall Plan was just a program. The money could only be used to buy American products. It was a program. Essentially, it was financed by Germans to support American production.
The Americans secured their influence in the region through the Bretton Woods agreements. Note, the documents for this system were signed back in 1944 before the war ended. The essence of Bretton Woods is simple. The dollar becomes the universal payment medium. Previously, it was gold.
Germany's gold reserve is stored in the United States of America. That is, they exchanged their gold for American dollars, which, as we know, are printed at will, by command, and are not backed by anything. The same story happened with other countries that, in the midst of World War II, to protect their capital, decided to evacuate it to the safest place, in their view. This place turned out to be the United States of America. And in fact, we now see what this led to. Yes, indeed, the USA sets and manipulates the exchange rate at its discretion. The USA regulates the economic system of countries tied to the dollar at its discretion.
The U.S. military presence in Germany began as early as 1945. The defeated country was occupied by the victorious country's troops, the USSR, the USA, and others. Even after the conflict ended, Germany remained a serious front in the Cold War. Provocations, skirmishes, and quarrels led to the emergence of two states instead of one, the FRG and the GDR.
Germany's political sovereignty is limited by the USA, which began in 1949 with the formation of pro-American West Germany, the Federal Republic of Germany. Since the formation of the FRG, American influence has determined key aspects of Germany's politics and economy. The reunification of Germany in 1990 only cemented the secondary status of the former GDR lands in the new Germany. While the FRG government continued to follow the U.S. policy under direct U.S. control, the German intelligence service BND was also created in the FRG.
In 1953, NATO, where key decisions were made by the USA, signed an agreement with the FRG, according to which Washington received the right to deploy its military contingents on its territory, essentially legalizing the occupation of the FRG by Western troops. Until 1990, Germany was not allowed to terminate it. After reunification, its actions were extended. Berlin pays annual contributions to the USA for hosting military bases.
The Berlin Wall became the main symbol of division. We'll talk about East Germany another time. But the West became both a U.S. protectorate and a showcase for which allies turned a blind eye to many things.
Formally, a denazification policy was conducted in West Germany, but in practice a large number of people who served in the Third Reich and even members of the NSDAP ended up in the FRG's state apparatus. The lower and middle ranks in the police and courts remained almost entirely from the Hitler period. Despite the fact that it was impossible to remain uninvolved in the persecution of people in such structures, said Konstantin Zalewski. When the FRG got its own Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1951, it quickly became clear that 2/3 of its employees were former Nazis. In response to a wave of criticism, Adenauer replied that it was time to stop sniffing out Nazis. In the same year, property rights of NSDAP members were restored in West Germany.
Adenauer received carte blanche from Washington for political actions, but with a caveat. American military bases and nuclear weapons were established in the FRG. The German Chancellor sold everything he could to restore the economy. The price turned out to be too high.
The Marshall Plan became the precursor to Europe's global economy. The next step, supported by the Dwight Eisenhower administration, was the European Coal and Steel Community. It was created in 1954. The flag, 6 yellow stars on a blue-black background. Later slightly modified, it would become the EU flag.
Considering American loans, all these movements went only in the direction needed by the Americans. There is a market, and there is a point of tension with the USSR. Washington is used to profiting in such controlled chaos. That's when Germany's vassalage began amid general applause.
It became known from an interview with the newspaper Zeit in September 2009, given by one of the ministers in the government of Social Democrat Willy Brandt, that West Germany depended on Uncle Sam across the ocean and his 2 European allies in the UK and France since the time of the first Chancellor, Konrad Adenauer. According to Chancellor's advisor, Egon Bahr, in 1969, in the early days of his tenure, Chancellor Brandt signed the so-called Chancellor Act at the Schomberg Palace. The Patriarch of Eastern Policy admitted that West Germany was in a complex system of dependence on the USA.
And no one can rise in the career ladder in Germany, in the media and politics, who has not gone through this program. Whether he is a student with a grant, or today sits on some councils, receives money for some fees, spoke for 20 minutes, received 10,000 euros, or something else. It's all simple here. Those not in these circles do not rise up the career ladder. Therefore, there is initially such a selection that only pro-American politicians and journalists make a career.
Today's Germany is still on the same path. The Star-Spangled Master brazenly tramples on German soil.
In the late 2000s, retired Major General Gert Helmut Kamasa released the book The German Card, The Closed Game of Secret Services. In it, he revealed that on May 21, 1949, a secret U.S. treaty was signed limiting Germany's sovereignty until 2099. Every new chancellor must sign the very same Chancellor Act.
Essentially, the document transfers the right to FRG's independence to Washington, and the money too. More than a third of Germany's gold and currency reserves are stored in the States.
Most of Germany's gold reserve is not in Frankfurt am Main or even in Europe. According to official data, out of more than 3,000 tons of the country's gold reserve, according to the World Gold Council, as of March 31, 2014, 1,500 tons, about 45%, are in the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank in New York.
The treaty clearly explains why German politicians have behaved for years as if they are deliberately sabotaging their own country. For lack of will, Berlin has even been called an economic giant but a political dwarf.
Any attempts by Germany to break free are stopped by military dependence. There are almost 40 U.S. military bases in the FRG. According to various data, up to 55,000 Uncle Sam's soldiers are stationed there, the largest military contingent in Europe. American nuclear weapons are also stored in the country. In 2021, Joe Biden stated that the Star-Spangled Ones would not leave Germany.
The U.S., with its impressive military budget, has taken the EU under its wing and constantly provokes its rivals militarily. Thus, it exposes the EU when it uses bases in Europe for war. Ramstein Airport, for example, was the main base for deploying troops in the Middle East, and in today's conflict, it also plays a significant role. Therefore, when Americans wage wars, Germany is always a party to the conflict, whether it wants to be or not.
By the way, the famous Ramstein military base where Zelensky went to ask for weapons is also American. And yes, it's no coincidence. The famous German rock band took its name, partly inspired by American audacity. They even dedicated a famous song to the USA, "America, we drink Coca-Cola, sometimes we fight." The culmination of feudal dependence, the explosions on the Nord Streams, Berlin suffered enormous humiliation and swallowed the sabotage that directly hit the German economy. Journalists found that the attack was the work of Americans and Ukrainians. What did Schultz do? Correct, nothing.
Germany has effectively become the country against which this terrorist attack was directed. But German foreign policy is entirely dependent on the USA. Therefore, I think Berlin will remain silent to the end and pretend everything is going according to plan. It currently has no freedom of action and cannot say anything different or go against the position of its senior partners. Yes, it can be confidently said that Germany is under pressure. We've already seen this when Chancellor Schultz obediently agreed in the States when the US president threatened to stop Nord Stream 2. In a normal situation, this would be perceived as a threat of attack or a terrorist act. This is unacceptable under international law. Any other country independent of the USA would say, "Wait a minute, Mr. President, did you really want to threaten us?" Noteworthy is Olaf Scholz's trip to the USA in 2022.
By the way, the Chancellor flies to the carpet annually. The media noticed a sharp change in the behavior of the German leader. And again, they remembered the Chancellor Act.
If we accept the version of the Chancellor Act's existence, it turns out that the Federal Republic of Germany is not a sovereign state, but at best can be designated as an allied structural component managed from the USA. At the same time, it is supposedly arranged so that the country's population does not notice this and does not oppose the arbitrariness. The sale of German firms abroad, the transfer of state energy and utility enterprises to foreign investors, the sale of supply lines, the alleged return of art supposedly stolen by German occupiers, the refusal of German gold reserves, military support for American imperialism. This, and much more, completely deprives the FRG of real sovereignty.
Besides sovereignty, the states are taking away Germany's main brand, a strong economy. They gave up cheap Russian gas, are forced to buy more expensive liquefied gas from the older American brother, severed ties with Russia. And now entire industries are sounding the alarm.
Amid growing difficulties, German companies have started moving their production to the USA. which the American government has been striving for, offering generous tax breaks for relocating companies. Germany is now experiencing economic difficulties that no longer allow it to engage in dialogue with the USA on equal terms. In the coming decades, the country may lose its competitiveness, which will only increase its dependence on the USA, which is strengthening its technological and industrial leadership.
Everything has become more expensive. Gas, electricity, food. Undermining its economy, and then silently watching as the states lure local business and well-known factories pack up. The amazing spinelessness of the German elites.
And the bonuses as after the war go to Washington. Thus, the U.S. defense industry receives gigantic orders. Gas producers earn super profits. German flagships move production to America. In general, while Germany obediently falls into depression, the states profit from Berlin's submission.
Meanwhile, Germany's economic growth has slowed to a historic low. Stagnation hits with increasingly harsh numbers. The number of unemployed is almost 3 million. It grows by about 60 to 70,000 each month.
According to Bild, citing the Federal Employment Agency of Germany, the demand for labor is decreasing. In August, there were 72,000 fewer job openings registered than in the same period last year. At the same time, there is still a shortage of skilled workers, doctors, mechanics, and plumbers.
In general, Washington makes the decisions and the German people bear the risks. What once seemed unshakable is collapsing. For the first time in its 87-year history, Volkswagen plans to close factories in Germany. And Mercedes and BMW are also under threat.
According to CEO Oliver Bloom, the FRG as a business location is increasingly lagging in terms of competitiveness. The company may close at least 2 factories in Germany for car and component production. The concern is also considering breaking the agreement with unions, which was signed until 2029 for strict cost-saving purposes.
Europe can't take a step without the USA, and when it does, it steps right into trouble. It's high time to think with their own minds without looking back at Uncle Sam. These are the emotions of a former NATO Military Committee chairman and retired Bundeswehr general.
The USA is trying to unite Europeans into its counterbloc. This became evident at the June NATO summit when the alliance took a course towards confrontation with Russia. Such a development is a disaster for Europe.
And it results in complete subordination in political, economic, and military spheres. The German economy is slowly sinking. Local enterprises are moving to the USA. There they receive benefits and land, already about 100 companies. Among them are car manufacturers, the lifeblood of Germany, and it feels like this is just the beginning. History teaches us the American eagle will only fly away after tearing the victim to the bone. I hope this is clear to you. Goodbye.